But there's another chapter in the story of the organ in America. From the Civil War on, the organ assumed an increasingly secular place in American culture, as organ recitals moved from the church to the new concert halls. The Methuen Memorial Music Hall in Massachusetts is home to America's first concert organ, imported from Germany in 1863. These majestic instruments rivaled the cathedral organs in size and power and inspired composers to write grand new secular works for the organ. American composer John Knowles Paine wrote his patriotic Concert Variations on the Star-Spangled Banner specifically for this instrument. In the middle of the 19th century, demand for pipe organs was immense, and America's organ builders scrambled to keep pace with a boom that would last for 100 years, making thousands of instruments for churches, homes, and concert halls. In an era before radio, television, or recordings, concert organs brought music to the masses. It was a matter of civic pride to have a concert organ, and all across America, they appeared in large cities and small towns alike, becoming the center of cultural life. Wherever there was an audience, the organ followed, even outdoors. In 1915, visitors to San Diego's International Exposition were entertained by an outdoor concert organ built especially for the occasion. Over 80 years later, the Spreckels organ still makes Sundays in Balboa Park something special. In 1911, John Wanamaker installed an organ in his Philadelphia department store. It grew into a gargantuan instrument with 6 keyboards, 729 stop tabs, and more than 28,000 pipes, what is still the largest working musical instrument in the world. In the Roaring '20s, the organ had a starring role in Hollywood. And though the silent era ended nearly 70 years ago, the art of silent film accompaniment is alive and well.
What I like is I like the vibration as well as the sound. It has a real nice, rich feel to it, and it gets inside you, and it's wonderful, it's fun. No, there's nothing like the mighty Wurlitzer.
It's a treat. You want total entertainment at the movies. You couldn't ask for more.
It's so massive, and it fills I mean, it's like having a symphony orchestra, isn't it?
This kind of takes you back to that time when things were a little simpler and movies were actually still an event.
Gaylord Carter is a living legend, one of the few theater organists whose career stretches back into the silent era. He has been entertaining audiences for over 70 years. In the 1960s, Gaylord started a revival of silent films with traditional organ accompaniment that continues to this day.
My father was a church organist in Wichita, Kansas. And I'd go to the movies on Saturday afternoon, and there was an organist in there accompanying silent pictures. And I would sneak into my father's church and try and do what I heard this guy doing. And so the pastor, the rector of the church, came in one day while I was doing this, and he says, "Gaylord, out, out, out. You got to stop playing this highfalutin music in this church." And he didn't know, and I didn't know, was going to support me for the rest of my life.
In 1922, Carter's family moved to Los Angeles, just as Hollywood entered its first golden age, and Gaylord got his first job accompanying films while only 17. This was the era of the picture palace, when going to the movies was an event, an escape into an exotic world of opulence and fantasy. At the center of it all was the pipe organ, breathing life into the silent images and creating the emotional soundscape for comedy, horror, adventure, and romance. In 1926, Gaylord got his big break when comedian Harold Lloyd heard him play and got him an audition at Grauman's $1 Million Theater. Gaylord landed the job, becoming at age 21 one of Hollywood's premier organists. He also began working with Lloyd to create music for his films.
And I remember we were checking through Safety Last, and there was this scene where he has lost his grip on these bricks on the building, and he catches a hold of the hands of a clock, and he's hanging there over the hands of the clock. And I swung it at time on my hands, and he says, "Gaylord, I'll do the jokes."
Tonight, Gaylord will celebrate his 90th birthday with a farewell performance at the Paramount Theater in Oakland, California.
Aisle 2 is to your left on this floor.
Please join us in welcoming Mr. Flicker Fingers himself, Gaylord Carter.
Once again, Gaylord brings to life the antics of Charlie Chaplin in The Immigrant. Chris Elliott, Gaylord's student and protege, is one of a new generation of organists who are keeping the art of silent film accompaniment alive. With each performance, the theater organist pulls off an amazing musical feat, creating the entire soundtrack of a film live in front of an audience. There is rarely a written score, so the organist must also be a composer, conjuring up all the moods and emotions that bring the film to life.
The drums? Oh, well, we have lots
Jim
of drums.
Riggs, the Paramount's resident organist, shares some of the tricks of the trade.
We also have silent movie sounds. Now, you saw a little bit of the silent movie on the screen earlier. We have sound effects that go along with making a silent picture. If you have an old car go across the screen, I push this button, it sounds like an old car horn. Did you hear a piano in there? Yeah. Well, there's a real piano way up high on the left side. Sounds like this. If you have a train, matter of fact, you can make a great train sound on this.
Good.
So where do aspiring organists learn how to play the pipe organ?
My music director played the organ, and she was like my idol when I was growing up. And so I really wanted to do this not just for me, but for like people around me, my parents, and especially her.
Garnett Allegado is at a week-long pipe organ encounter in San Francisco, sponsored by the American Guild of Organists.
There, that's really great.
Across town, Garnett's roommate, Sarah Phillipson, is at her morning lesson. Like many of their peers, this is the first time that either of the girls has played the organ. But at the end of the week, they'll be playing their first recital for friends and family.
What did we say about don't stop?
I know, but I need to slow down.
Okay, let's go back to here and just start it at a little slower tempo. That was better than you've done it before.
Until I got to the...
Right, just keep going.
Sitting down at the organ for the first time was like, oh my gosh, this is me. And it was really neat to hear that I could actually make all those sounds and pull out all the stops and just, play.
Let's take the first group, and we're going to show you where the beginning of sound starts in the organ, which is in the creation of the wind in the blower room. So
Another part of the pipe organ encounter is learning how an organ works.
Okay, follow me in, watch your head.
The sound of the pipe organ begins down in the blower room with the generation of wind pressure by a set of powerful electric fans. Just as a person draws breath to sing, the blowers act as the lungs of the organ, creating the wind to make the pipes speak.
Well, this is where the wind starts out in the organ. There are two big blowers. They're basically just big fans encased in these cast aluminum housings. And there's another one over there on the other side. This wind starts off on this organ in two different pressures. If you look over there, you see two great big boxes. One is natural wood and one is red, painted. And that's where the wind is stored. They actually act as reservoirs until the wind is needed up in the organ. Let me show you what happens when I kick on a blower. This is what they call the low pressure blower. And that basically acts as a storage space for the wind until it's needed up in the chests upstairs. That expands and that whole thing flexes and moves up and down as the wind is needed in the organ. So if somebody were to tromp on a big chord in the organ, that whole thing would sag back down and fill itself back up with this blower here. We also have a higher pressure blower for the trumpets and the big pedal stops, and that fills up that smaller reservoir over there.
The console, the control center of the organ, has keyboards, pedals, and knobs called stops. The stops turn on different sets of pipes, allowing the organist to change the sound of the instrument to suit different styles of music.
Okay, now we're going to find out how we get from the keyboard to the actual chest and actually make the notes. So I'd like 4 of you to go right in through that door. 2, 3, and 4. Okay, then I need all 3 of you guys to sit here on the bench. Trump on the keyboards for us, guys. I want to show these people what happens.
This organ has a mechanical action. Each key is connected to a long wooden rod called a tracker, which goes up through the organ and is connected to a valve underneath the pipe. When a key is pressed, the tracker pulls open the valve and lets wind into the pipe.
Okay, now some pedal action for us. Now we have a whole different set of things to move down here. Alrighty, that was just lovely. Okay, let's head on up to the organ, inside. So you'll see a few wooden pipes as you go by. There's a part of the pedal. Even says what it is on the back. Follow me up if you would.
This organ is 3 stories tall.
Watch your step.
On the second level is the group of pipes called the Positive Division.
Now we've been following these trackers up. We started down at the keyboard and then we watched them as they crawled up the side of the organ and made a few turns, and here's one place where they finally end up. If you look right under here, underneath this chest, you can see the very ends of the trackers, and they're connected to little wires that go up in the chest. And now we're going to take a peek right inside the chest. I'm going to loosen this cover up. You can see there's a lot of wind in there. There's so much I'm going to have to shut the organ off. I'm going to move one of these trackers down. And as you can see, it's connected to a wire that actually pulls down this piece of wood called a pallet. And under that pallet's a little hole that admits air up into the channels and lets us play the pipes. Okay, right now we're standing in front of the Positive Division of the organ.
The thousands of pipes in this organ are grouped into 4 divisions, each with its own keyboard and distinct sound. By combining stops from each division, the organist can create a limitless variety of sounds, everything from the softest flute to a mighty roar that shakes the building.
Okay, let's head on up to the swell.
At the top of the organ is the Swell Division. It's unique because its pipes are enclosed in a box with shutters, which allows the organist to control their volume.
Okay, we're going to show you how the Swell Box works. You know how in a house Venetian blinds let the light in and out? Well, the same thing happens on the Swell Box to control volume. Hey, Ron? Why don't you give us a demonstration of how the Swell Box works?